Jean Dupont grew up in a small village on the outskirts of Paris. From an early age, he was introduced to the world of cooking through his mother, an accomplished cook, who always prepared simple meals, but full of flavor. Jean loved spending afternoons in the kitchen with her, watching her every move and absorbing the magic of the ingredients that were transformed into irresistible dishes. His childhood was marked by the aromas of fresh herbs, homemade breads and traditional French dishes. That family environment was the birthplace of his passion for gastronomy. As she grew older, Jean began to explore more about local cuisine, studying recipes and techniques from renowned chefs. At a young age, he decided that he would pursue a career in gastronomy, and at the age of 18 he left his small village to venture to Paris, one of the world's gastronomy capitals. Arriving in the city was like entering a new world. The bustling cafes, vibrant street markets and renowned restaurants seemed to be the very essence of the French spirit. Jean was determined to conquer his space there. For years he worked in various kitchens, from small bistros to exquisite Michelin-starred establishments. He started washing dishes, became a kitchen assistant and eventually worked his way up to assistant chef positions. Each stage of this journey was a learning opportunity, and Jean knew how to make the most of each one. His dedication and perseverance did not go unnoticed, and in a short time he became a reference among his colleagues. Finally, at the age of 42, after 2 decades of hard work and sacrifice, Jean realized his biggest dream. He opened his own restaurant, the Reflection of Paris. Located on a discreet corner in the heart of the capital, the restaurant quickly became a haven for food lovers. Jean didn't just offer food, he created experiences. His carefully crafted menu mixed classic recipes with a modern twist, and soon the place became known for the excellence of its dishes and the warm welcome Jean offered to everyone. The Reflection of Paris, it was much more than just a restaurant for Jean. Every detail of the establishment reflected his journey and dedication to cooking. The discreet facade hid what was behind the doors, a welcoming environment, where customers felt transported to a simpler era, a place where time seemed to stop and the focus was on the gastronomic experience. The restaurant's walls were adorned with black and white photographs of old Parisian streets, capturing the essence of the city Jean loved so much. The rustic wooden tables contrasted elegantly with the soft lighting, creating an inviting space full of character. The kitchen, always busy, was the beating heart of the Reflection of Paris. Jean made a point of supervising everything closely. Even though he was the owner, he was not in the habit of staying in the office. He preferred to be alongside his team, trying new dishes, suggesting adjustments and maintaining the standard he valued so much. He believed that a restaurant was an extension of your soul, and the soul of the Reflection of Paris, it was the uncompromising quality. Customers knew that they would find not only food there, but passion in every detail. However, despite the initial success and rave reviews, Jean never underestimated the challenges of running a restaurant in Paris. The city was a relentless arena, with new establishments popping up around every corner, and he knew he would always need to stay one step ahead to remain relevant. Competitors appeared frequently, offering quick and cheap dishes, something Jean always rejected. For him, gastronomy was not about rushing, but about taking the time to appreciate the essence of each ingredient. And it was this philosophy that guided his life. In the early years, the Reflection of Paris, it was an undisputed success. Customers from all over Paris came to taste the dishes carefully prepared by Jean Dupont and your team. The restaurant became known for its welcoming atmosphere and refined menu, which mixed classic with contemporary. Jean, he was satisfied with the direction his life was taking, but he always remained alert. I knew that, in Paris, the gastronomic market was fierce, and that today's success might not guarantee tomorrow's. It was then that the first signs of change began to emerge. Jean noticed a slight drop in the number of bookings, something he initially attributed to seasonal factors. However, as the months passed, business at the restaurant continued to decline. What was once a constant line of customers waiting for a table had now become quieter nights, with empty tables and waiters waiting for orders. Restlessness began to take over Jean, but he was reluctant to admit that something was wrong. For him, the quality of his dishes was still impeccable, and the service was always attentive. However, a new reality approached, invisible to the eyes of Jean. A new competitor was about to change the scene on the same street as the reflection of Paris. The Bistro Express, with its proposal for quick and cheap meals, had begun to attract a younger audience, who were looking for practicality to the detriment of the complete gastronomic experience. And while Jean maintained its focus on excellence, Bistro Express it grew silently, taking a slice of its clientele. Over time, the impact became clear. The restaurant Jean it was no longer the mandatory destination it used to be. He knew something needed to be done, but he was caught between maintaining his philosophy and adapting to a new reality that didn't seem compatible with his ideals. The atmosphere inside the kitchen, the reflection of Paris, also started to change. What was once an environment of cooperation and harmony began to give way to silent tensions. The team seemed unmotivated, and Jean noticed a slight drop in the enthusiasm with which the dishes were prepared. Ingredients were wasted more frequently, and meal preparation time lengthened for no apparent reason. Although he didn't want to believe it, Jean began to suspect that something was wrong in his own home. The person responsible for the kitchen, Louis, who had worked with Jean since the restaurant opened, it also seemed more distant. Louis, he was a talented chef with a sharp mind for flavor combinations, but over the past few weeks, he had been acting strangely. He spent more time on his cell phone, gave orders impatiently, and occasionally made small changes to the menu without consulting Jean. One night, after another session of disappointingly empty dinners, Jean decided to stay late at the restaurant to review the numbers. As he walked towards the kitchen, he heard a conversation that left him disturbed. Louis, he was talking to one of the waiters about a new beginning and how this place's days were numbered. The words echoed in his mind Jean, and the suspicion he had been trying to ignore became an uncomfortable certainty. His trusted chef was involved in something that threatened the future of the reflection of Paris. The pain of betrayal began to take shape. Jean, I knew that confronting Louis it was inevitable, but the mere idea that someone he blindly trusted was sabotaging his dream left him distressed. It was time to act, but what Jean, I still didn't know how deep the blow would actually be. After weeks of distrust, Jean Dupont, I knew I could no longer ignore the signs that something was wrong within the reflection of Paris. The conversation he heard between Louis and the waiter had confirmed his suspicions. His trusted chef, the one who had been by his side since the restaurant opened, was sabotaging the establishment. The pain of betrayal burned in his chest, but he knew he couldn't let himself be paralyzed by the feeling. It was time to act. One night, after a lukewarm service with few tables occupied, Jean took courage and decided to confront Louis. With a heavy heart, he entered the kitchen, where the chef was reviewing the stock of ingredients. The tension in the air was palpable. Jean, he tried to remain calm, but his voice betrayed the emotion he was trying to contain. "I need to talk to you," he said bluntly. Louis, he looked at him with a neutral expression, as if he knew that moment would come. "What is happening, Louis?" "I have noticed changes, not only in the kitchen, but in the team. Things are not right. And I hear you talking about this place like you've already given up on it. What is happening?" he asked. Jean, voice shaking. The silence that followed was painful. Louis finally broke the gaze, and with a heavy sigh, admitted, "You're right, Jean. I'm leaving. I have a proposal for a new restaurant that will open on the same street, and they offered me the position of head chef. It doesn't make sense to stay here." The words of Louis reached Jean like a stab. All the effort, the trust he had placed in his chef, now seemed in vain. "The reflection of Paris, it was my life, Louis. How could you do that?" Louis, he didn't respond immediately, he just shrugged his shoulders and left the kitchen without looking back, leaving Jean alone to deal with the pieces of his broken trust. After the abrupt departure of Louis, the restaurant plunged into an even deeper crisis. The absence of a head chef left a void in the kitchen that could not be easily filled. The team, already unmotivated, was now completely lost. Without someone to lead them, the waiters and cooks seemed unsure of what to do. Customers, who previously frequented the Reflection of Paris regularly, they were now a rare sight, and reviews began to reflect the decline in the quality of service and food. To Jean, the situation was a nightmare. He spent his nights alone in the restaurant, reviewing the increasingly worrying numbers and trying to find a solution. The idea of closing the doors of the Reflection of Paris, the dream he had built with so much sacrifice, became a real possibility. He had never felt so helpless. All the years of effort, the dedication to cooking, seemed to crumble before his eyes. As the days passed, Jean began to face a harsh reality. Without Louis and without a motivated team, your restaurant wouldn't survive much longer. Bills were piling up, and suppliers began to pressure him for late payments. He knew that unless he found a solution quickly, he would be on the verge of bankruptcy. However, in the midst of despair, Jean still refused to give up. There was something inside him that drove him to continue, to look for a way out, even when everything seemed lost. The Reflection of Paris, it was more than a restaurant, it was the personification of his love for gastronomy and the city of Paris. With the remaining determination, Jean decided he would do whatever was necessary to save his legacy, even if it meant starting over from scratch. After leaving Louis and the worsening of the crisis in the Reflection of Paris, Jean Dupont found himself on the verge of collapse. Each day at the restaurant felt like one step closer to the inevitable end. On a particularly lonely night, after closing the establishment earlier than usual, he decided to take a walk through the empty streets of Paris, looking for clarity and, who knows, a solution to his problems. It was during this journey that fate intervened. Passing through an alley at the back of the restaurant, he saw strange movement. Initially cautious, he approached slowly, and what he saw shook him deeply. A woman and a girl, both visibly worn out, were crouched next to cardboard boxes, trying to protect themselves from the cold of the Parisian night. The woman, Clara, noticed the approach of Jean and quickly stood up, with an apologetic expression. "We're sorry, sir. We didn't mean to disturb you. My daughter Sophie and I have no place to stay, and we ate some leftovers from the restaurants here, we didn't know it was open." He looked at the two, touched by the scene that mirrored, in a way, the despair he himself felt. Although their difficulties were different, there was something in Clara and Sophie which reminded him of his own battle to survive in the competitive world of Paris. Without thinking twice, he made an unexpected offer: "Come with me. You can take shelter in the Reflection of Paris. In return, they can help me keep the restaurant organized while I figure out what to do." The eyes of Clara, they were filled with disbelief and gratitude. "Are you serious?" she asked, still hugging the little girl. Sophie, who looked curiously at Jean. "Yes," he replied, with a tired but genuine smile. "This place is big enough for the three of us. Let's try to help each other." Clara and Sophie, they soon settled into the restaurant, transforming what was once just a lonely workspace into Jean in a slightly more lively environment. In the days that followed, Clara proved surprisingly useful. Although initially shy, she revealed surprising skills in the kitchen. To Jean, who was used to leading his team alone, it was a pleasant surprise to see Clara moving around the kitchen with silent competence. She started the day by helping to clean the room and organize the utensils, but little by little, she started preparing small, simple dishes, especially for her daughter. With each meal she prepared, I was more impressed. The precision with which Clara he cut vegetables, the care with which he seasoned the dishes and the simplicity with which he transformed common ingredients into something delicious caught his attention. "You know," he commented. Jean one night while watching Clara prepare soup for Sophie, "You have a special talent. Have you ever thought about working as a chef?" Clara he laughed lightly, a sound that seemed almost forgotten in his life. "I've worked in kitchens before, but, well, life took a different turn. Today, all I want is a little stability for my daughter. Jean. He nodded silently, but an idea began to form in his mind. He saw something in Clara which made him believe she could be the key to saving the restaurant. As the days go by, Clara and Jean were establishing an unlikely partnership. She cooked small dishes for him to try, and together they discussed how they could reinvent the restaurant's menu. The reflection of Paris. For the first time in a long time, Jean felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, with Clara by his side, he could not only save the restaurant, but also give it a new direction. The days following the arrival of Clara and Sophie to the reflection of Paris, they brought new energy to the restaurant. To Jean Dupont, their presence represented more than company in times of crisis. It was an opportunity to rediscover the meaning of his passion for gastronomy. Clara, despite his difficult life story, demonstrated a natural ability in the kitchen, and with each dish he prepared, Jean he saw in her a spark of talent that reminded him of himself at the beginning of his career. One afternoon, while the dining room was still empty, Clara presented to Jean an unexpected suggestion. "I know your menu has always been focused on haute cuisine, but what if we tried something simpler, more accessible? I think we could attract an audience looking for something authentic, but without the usual formality." The idea was bold, especially for someone like Jean, who has always valued sophistication in his dishes. However, he knew that circumstances required change. With the restaurant on the brink of financial abyss, he could no longer afford to ignore new possibilities. "Let's try," he replied, with a hint of hesitation but also curiosity. The two spent the afternoon experimenting with new flavor combinations, revisiting classic French dishes, but with a simpler and more welcoming approach. Clara brought influences from their own life experiences, while Jean adjusted technical details, ensuring that each dish still maintained the level of quality for which the reflection of Paris was known. When night came, the first test would be done. Jean and Clara they served the new dishes to the few customers who still frequented the restaurant, eagerly awaiting feedback. The reactions were immediate, smiles of satisfaction and warm compliments. The environment, previously filled with uncertainty, was now filled with an atmosphere of lightness and hope. It seemed like finally the restaurant was finding its way again. While Jean observed the positive feedback from customers, he could not help but be impressed by the synergy that had emerged between him and Clara. She was not only a talented cook, but also a creative mind, able to see what the reflection of Paris needed to survive. With each new dish they created together, Jean he realized that she had a deep understanding of flavors and people, something he believed he had lost over time. On a quieter night, while they were cleaning the kitchen, Jean decided to open the game. "Clara, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done so far. I was about to give up, and then you and Sophie appeared. I feel like maybe we can save this place, but I'm going to need you by my side." Clara he stopped what he was doing and looked at him with a surprised expression. "I don't know what to say, Jean. I came here without any expectations, I just wanted a safe place to Sophie. But what we're building together has given me something I didn't even know I was looking for." Jean smiled. He knew he was asking for more than a simple professional commitment. The partnership between the two had already shown promise, but now he was proposing something deeper, trust in Clara to lead the revival of the reflection of Paris. "I was thinking of something more formal," he said. "Jean, choosing your words carefully. What if you became my head chef? We would work together to create a new chapter for the restaurant." Clara she was silent for a moment, clearly surprised by the offer. She had never imagined that she could come so far in such a short time. "I'll think about it," he replied, still digesting the proposal. But the seed was planted. The future of the reflection of Paris now it looked brighter, and for the first time in months, Jean felt the restaurant had a real chance of survival. With the decision to follow a new direction in the reflection of Paris, Jean Dupont and Clara they knew they were about to take a big step. The weeks that followed were intense. The restaurant underwent small renovations, both in terms of ambience and menu, and the remaining team regrouped under the leadership of Jean and Clara. The idea was simple: to offer a more accessible culinary experience, without losing the authenticity and touch of sophistication that the restaurant has always had. Clara, who had accepted the role of head chef after days of reflection, was excited about the possibilities. For her, this was more than a professional opportunity, it was a chance to rebuild his life and guarantee a better future for his daughter, Sophie. Every dish that left the kitchen reflected not only French tradition, but also the simplicity and comfort that Clara believed what customers were looking for. On the night of its reopening, the restaurant was different. The changes in the environment, with softer lighting and a more welcoming layout, made the Reflection of Paris appear less formal and more inviting. Jean and Clara they watched nervously as the first customers entered. There were no guarantees that the changes would work, but they knew it was a risk they needed to take. As the dishes began to be served, the atmosphere of tension gave way to a wave of relief. Customer reactions were extremely positive. The food, a mix of classic recipes and new creations from Clara, won over the taste buds of visitors. Enthusiastic comments filled the room, and Jean I could finally breathe easier. For the first time in months, he saw a light at the end of the tunnel. While the Reflection of Paris was reborn, not all the looks were of admiration. The competing restaurant, Bistro Express, which had gained popularity with its quick and affordable meals, began to notice the return of longtime restaurant regulars. Jean. The impact was immediate. While the Reflection of Paris gained strength, the movement in Bistro Express began to decrease. Across the street, the new owner of Bistro Express I followed everything carefully. He had big plans for his restaurant and had invested heavily in advertising and marketing to attract customers. The initial success was resounding, but now he began to feel pressure from the competition. And it wasn't just any competition, was Jean Dupont, a veteran of Parisian gastronomy, known for his dedication to quality. The murmurs that Clara, the new chef of the Reflection of Paris, was behind the restaurant's rebirth reached the ears of the restaurant's owner Bistro Express. He could not allow the success of Jean and Clara affect your business. He then began to devise ways to win back customers, planning aggressive campaigns to reduce prices and offer promotions that could attract the young public back. But Jean and Clara they knew that the real battle would not just be one of price. They were confident that what they offered was something more valuable, a genuine experience, quality food and a welcoming environment. The challenge was just beginning, but this time, Jean I was prepared to face whatever came my way. With Clara by his side, he felt that the restaurant was finally on the right path, even with the watchful eyes of the competition. With the success of the reopening, Jean Dupont and Clara they barely had time to process the changes. The Reflection of Paris began to attract more and more customers, many of whom returned to relive the experience they always loved at the restaurant, now with a renewed touch. Nights that were once silent were now filled with laughter and conversation, and the constant flow of customers surprised even the oldest employees. The new, more accessible and welcoming approach was paying off. Clara he shined in the kitchen, commanding the team with confidence and inspiration. The menu they had created together was winning over palates from different backgrounds, and praise from food critics began to appear in local newspapers. Jean I felt I had finally found the right balance between tradition and innovation. However, with the increase in movement, new challenges emerged. The demand for more dishes and the pressure to maintain quality at each meal began to take a toll on the team. Jean, even though he was used to the frenetic pace of Parisian gastronomy, he found himself overwhelmed at certain times. He knew he would need to hire more staff, but finding people with the same level of dedication and skill wouldn't be easy. Furthermore, the restaurant's growing popularity has also brought it to the attention of important figures in the Paris food scene. Businessmen began to appear, suggesting partnerships or investments, offering Jean and Clara the possibility of expanding the business. Success, which previously seemed so distant, was now knocking on the door in an almost overwhelming way. Jean, however, remained cautious. Although the idea of expanding was tempting, he knew that rapid growth could destroy the essence they were fighting to maintain. While the reflection of Paris prospered, the Bistro Express, its main competitor, felt the effects of this rise. Aggressive price promotions and marketing efforts were not working as expected. The public seemed to have grown tired of the idea of quick meals and was slowly returning to more authentic experiences, like the one Jean and Clara offered. The owner of Bistro Express wasn't willing to lose the battle so easily. He decided it was time to move on to bolder strategies. Knowing that the restaurant Jean was still in the financial reconstruction phase, he began making aggressive offers to suppliers who served the reflection of Paris, trying to force them to raise prices or break contracts. Jean was caught off guard when some of its suppliers began to hesitate to renew their contracts or came up with new prices that were impossible to sustain. He soon realized that something bigger was at stake. "This is no coincidence," he told Clara one night while they were reviewing the accounts. "Someone is trying to put us out of business by the roots." Clara. He was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Do you think you are the Bistro Express?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Jean nodded. "They are desperate. And they will try everything to take us down." The situation brought new tension to the restaurant. While Jean and Clara struggled to deal with the growing pressure, the battle now went beyond attracting customers. It was an invisible war behind the scenes. They would need to reinvent themselves once again, this time to face an enemy that didn't play fair. But Jean was decided, he would not lose the reflection of Paris again. With the growing success of the reflection of Paris, the situation behind the scenes began to become more tense. Suppliers were being pressured to raise their prices, and cost management, already a challenge, was becoming increasingly complicated. Jean Dupont and Clara realized that the competition was playing dirty. The Bistro Express, under the leadership of its ambitious owner, was willing to do anything to stifle the restaurant's growth. Jean. In the kitchen, the climate of uncertainty was beginning to affect the team. With order pressure and the imminent risk of an increase in costs, Jean knew that any mistake could be fatal for the business. Tension was in the air, and he wondered how far his competitor would go to ensure the downfall of the reflection of Paris. "We can't let them break us," he told her. Clara, as they reviewed the finances once again. "We have to be smarter, more resilient." Clara, always focused on solutions, suggested a different strategy: strengthening ties with customers. "If they want to take us down behind the scenes, we need to make sure our customers stay loyal to us. They are our greatest strength. If we maintain quality, service and our authenticity, they won't abandon us." Jean agreed. He knew that the true soul of the restaurant was not just the food, but the experience he and his team offered. Therefore, they decided to invest in a closer approach to customers, holding special events, tastings and themed nights. It was a way of ensuring that, regardless of the competition's dirty maneuvers, patrons continued to choose the reflection of Paris. The personal relationship that Jean and Clara established with their customers became even stronger, while the restaurant began to be seen as a safe haven, a place where people could feel at home. However, the apparent tranquility would not last long. The Bistro Express was willing to give a stronger blow. One night, while Jean was reviewing the latest details of a special event at the restaurant, one of the waiters entered the kitchen with a worried expression. "Jean, there's someone from the health department outside. They're here for a surprise inspection." The heart of Jean accelerated. He knew an inspection was routine, but the timing seemed suspicious. On that particular night, the restaurant was full, and any interruption could be a disaster. He went to reception, where he was informed that an anonymous report had been made alleging that the restaurant was operating under unsanitary conditions. The accusation struck Jean by surprise, as he had always prided himself on keeping the reflection of Paris impeccable. He took the inspectors to the kitchen, where everything was in order, as always. However, the process was long, and the presence of inspectors ended up affecting the atmosphere of the restaurant. Patrons began whispering among themselves, some became uncomfortable, and the evening's event, which was supposed to be a huge success, ended on a sour note. After the inspectors left without finding any irregularities, Jean and Clara they knew that the attack was a maneuver by the Bistro Express. They were willing to play hardball, at any cost. "This isn't going to end here," he said. Jean and Clara, while they cleaned the kitchen in silence. "They are trying to destroy us. But we will not give in." No matter how difficult it was, Jean knew that the fight was not just for the restaurant, but for everything he and Clara they had built. He was determined to face every blow that came, certain that his love for gastronomy and the loyalty of his customers would be the most powerful weapons he had. After the surprise inspection at the Reflection of Paris, Jean Dupont and Clara they knew they were in the middle of an invisible war. The weeks that followed were fraught with tension. The team, although dedicated, felt the weight of constant attacks from the competition. Loyal customers continued to frequent the restaurant, but there was an air of uncertainty in the air. Jean he knew that any other blow could be fatal for the restaurant, which was already in a delicate financial situation. Clara, on the other hand, kept his focus on the kitchen. She knew that the only way to keep her customers the Reflection of Paris was to ensure that every meal served was impeccable. "They might try to bring us down, Jean, but as long as we keep doing what we know best, they won't make it," she said, as they reviewed the new menu they had prepared for the week. It was then that something unexpected happened. A renowned gastronomic critic, known for his rigorous reviews and his influence on the culinary world, decided to visit the Reflection of Paris. Without warning, he arrived one night and, discreetly, sat down at one of the tables. To Jean and Clara, that could be a blessing or a disaster, depending on the experience he had. The kitchen was in full operation, and every dish that came out was a work of art. Clara she was more attentive than ever, making sure every detail was perfect. When the reviewer finally finished his meal, he did something unusual. He asked to speak to the chef. Clara, surprised, went to him. "Your work is admirable," said the critic, smiling slightly. "The flavor, the presentation, the attention to detail, all of this reminds me of the great classics of French gastronomy, but with a unique touch." Jean watched from afar, trying to control his anxiety, but when he saw the smile of Clara, I knew that this could be the turning point they so needed. A few days later, the review was published, and the impact was immediate. The critic's glowing words brought a new wave of customers to the Reflection of Paris. The restaurant, which had been struggling to stay afloat, now faced a new kind of pressure, meeting growing demand while maintaining the quality and standard for which they had become known. With the positive review, Jean saw a golden opportunity to consolidate the name of the Reflection of Paris on the Parisian gastronomic scene once and for all. He knew he couldn't waste this chance. In a meeting with Clara and the rest of the team, he shared his vision. "We have a window of opportunity here. We need to use it to consolidate our restaurant and show that we are stronger than any attack." Clara agreed. She had already considered expanding the menu, adding dishes that further reflected her personal influences and experiences. It was the chance to transform the restaurant into something truly innovative, without losing the essence that Jean always maintained. "If we do this right," she said, "we won't be just another restaurant in Paris. We'll be a landmark." With the new popularity, Jean began to attract investors. Some entrepreneurs, impressed by the resilience and rebirth of the Reflection of Paris, made proposals to expand the brand, suggesting the opening of a branch or even partnerships in other gastronomic projects around the city. Jean, however, was cautious. He knew that sudden success was fragile, and any hasty move could put everything in jeopardy. Still, he felt that a new phase was about to begin. Next to Clara, he was determined to move forward, not just to beat unfair competition from Bistro Express, but to transform the Reflection of Paris into something even bigger. And for the first time in months, he felt not fear of what the future might bring, but a growing excitement, fueled by the hope and passion he and Clara they shared food. With the growing success of the Reflection of Paris, Jean Dupont and Clara they realized that they had overcome the most difficult obstacles. The renowned gastronome's positive review had brought a new era of prosperity to the restaurant, and the constant flow of customers made the days of uncertainty a distant memory. But with this new chapter, new decisions needed to be made. The possibility of expanding the restaurant, whether with a branch or strategic partnerships, was increasingly present. Investors saw in Jean and Clara a successful team, which managed to transform a moment of crisis into a triumph. However, Jean hesitated. Expanding meant taking more risks, and he feared losing the essence of the restaurant, something that had always been his greatest pride. During a night walk through Paris, Jean and Clara discussed the options. "I never wanted to open more than one restaurant," he said. Jean, looking at the city lights. "I have always believed that the Reflection of Paris it should be unique, something that could only be found here." Clara, I listened intently, understanding his concerns, but also feeling that there was potential for something greater. "I understand what you mean, Jean, but maybe we can expand without losing who we are. We can take the experience of the Reflection of Paris to other places, without compromising our identity." This was a decision that needed to be made carefully. Jean, I knew that expansion would bring new challenges, but I also knew that, with Clara by his side, they had a real chance of success. "Maybe the key is how we do it," he concluded. "If we maintain control, if we make sure each new restaurant follows the same philosophy, we can expand without losing what we've built here." Days later, Jean made his decision. He and Clara they would decide to expand, but in a careful way, with strict control over every detail. It would not be an unbridled expansion, but a way of taking the name of the Reflection of Paris to new audiences, maintaining the spirit of authenticity and quality. The first steps were taken with a strategic partnership to open a branch in Lyon, another city with a strong culinary tradition. The hard work began immediately. Jean and Clara they spent weeks traveling and planning, selecting the team with the same rigor with which they had created the original restaurant team in Paris. The new location, although it had its own identity, would bring the same essence and dedication that had transformed the Reflection of Paris in a success. Each dish, each detail of the environment, was designed to reproduce the experience that Jean and Clara they had perfected. Meanwhile, the original restaurant continued to prosper. Sophie, now more accustomed to the rhythm of the restaurant, had become a constant presence and loved by regular customers, bringing a touch of lightness and joy to the environment. Clara, in his role as chef, was increasingly comfortable, creating new dishes that maintained the Reflection of Paris at the top of recommendations from critics and customers. The Bistro Express, in turn, began to decline. His aggressive tactics failed to shake the solid foundation that Jean and Clara they had built. The public once again valued authenticity and quality that only the Reflection of Paris offered. Eventually, the Bistro Express closed its doors, unable to keep pace. The future of Jean and Clara now it looked promising. They had won the invisible war and, more importantly, discovered a new purpose together. Next to Sophie, they formed not just a team, but a family. The Reflection of Paris it was stronger than ever, and controlled expansion was just the beginning of a new era. Jean he looked at the restaurant one last time before closing its doors for the night and smiled. What had started as a solitary dream had now become a true legend in French cuisine, with a bright future ahead of him.